boys and girls, I'm so glad to see you again. I am always glad to see you. Every time I see you, even if it's the first time I'm seeing you. Then it's not again, but still happy. Happy, happy. It's a good day to be happy and to smile and to tell some jokes and to maybe tickle someone if they like to be tickled. I've got 2 stories today, one of which is not really funny and the other is really funny. So I hope that I can get some smiles out of that one, and I hope I can get some smiles when we sing together and do our finger plays, and I'm just excited to get started. Aren't you? So let's get started. Here we are together again, let's clap and make some noise. It's time to share some stories and friends with all the girls and boys. So come and gather all around and then we will begin to open up our listening ears. It's story time again. Boys and girls, I don't know if you know this, but this is not the library where I am right now. This is my house. And these are only a few of the books that I have here. I personally like having a lot of books, but some people might think that this is too many, especially since this is just a little bit of the giant collection. Do you have too much of something? Did you ever want a whole lot of something and someone told you it was too much? I have a story about a woman who made that mistake. And in her case, it really, really was a mistake. She got, well, we'll see what happened to her. See, this is the story of the fisherman and his wife. A long time ago, there was a fisherman who lived with his wife, Isabel, in a small hut. That's like a house that's not very big. Maybe it only has 1 room. And they didn't have very much money, but the hut was just right for them. They didn't need much. 1 bed, a table to eat at. They didn't need big fancy guest rooms or a piano or anything like that. The hut was just right for them. But Isabel, the wife, was a grouchy sort of woman, and she always wanted more than what she had. So she was not happy in the hut. Well, one day, the fisherman went down to the sea to see what he could catch. And he fished all day, and he caught some fish, but not very many, until when he was almost done, he felt his line tug, and when he pulled it up, there was a giant golden fish on the end of it. And for a moment, he thought that he would make a lot of money selling that fish. But when he took the hook out of its mouth, the fish said, "Please, I am not an ordinary fish. I am a magic fish. If you throw me back into the water and let me go, I will grant you a wish." And the fisherman was stunned. He said, "Mr. Fish, I do not need anything from you. I am so sorry for pulling you from the water. Please forgive me." And he threw him back in the water and felt better, because he honestly did not want to hurt any sort of animal that could talk back to him. And he went home that night and he talked to Isabel, his wife, and he told her the story of the fish, and she was mad. She said, "How could you just let him go when he offered you a wish and you didn't take it? I want you to go right back down to that water right now and call that fish back. And I want you to get that wish. I want a much nicer house than this. I want a big house with nice things in it and a garden in back." And the fisherman said, "We don't really need that." But she insisted. And so he went down to the water. And he stood at the edge of the water and he called, "Oh, fish of the sea, oh, fish of the sea, please come up and listen to me. Come, for my wife Isabel wishes what I dare not tell." And as soon as he finished, that fish came bobbing up to the surface and said, "What is your wish?" And the fisherman said, "My wife wants a big fancy house with nice things and a garden." And the fish said, "Go home. She already has it." And so the fisherman went home, and there where his hut used to be stood a nice house with a little white trim around the roof edges, and inside they had 2 bedrooms, and they had a nice adorable little bathroom, and out back they had a garden that had not just vegetables but beautiful flowers. It was more than he'd ever imagined having for himself. But the next morning, as they sat at their new table eating breakfast, Isabel was drumming her fingers on the table. And the fisherman said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "We should have asked for more. If a fish can give us a house this nice, then he could give us a castle." And the fisherman said, "But we don't need a castle." And Isabel grew angrier and angrier, and she slammed her fist on the table, and she said, "You go right back down to that water, and you tell that fish that I want a castle now." The fisherman felt very uncomfortable, but he went down to the water, and he called, "Oh, fish of the sea, oh, fish of the sea, please come up and listen to me. Come, for my wife Isabel wishes what I dare not tell." And just as before, the fish came up and said, "What is your wish?" And the fisherman shifted from foot to foot and said, "Now my wife would like a castle instead of the house." And the fish said, "Go home, for she already has it." And when the fisherman came back to where his house had stood, now there was a great big stone castle there. A stone castle that had crystal chandeliers hanging, and it had gilt, that means lined with gold or covered with gold, furniture all over the place, and it was glorious. But there stood his wife in the front hall, looking around, looking unhappy. And the fisherman said, "Why aren't you happy? Isn't this what you wanted?" And she said, "I suppose. But it's not quite grand enough, I think." And the fisherman knew what was coming next. And all he could do was listen when Isabel said, "I want a castle where I can be king." The fisherman didn't know what else to say, but, "Don't you mean queen?" And the woman said, "No, I want to be king of a grand castle. Go, ask for it." The fisherman tried to say no this time. He really did. He didn't want to live in a grand castle. He didn't want to have his wife be king. And she scolded him and nagged him until he had no peace, and all he could do was go back down to the water. And he called out, "Oh, fish of the sea, please come up and listen to me. Come, for my wife Isabel wishes what I dare not tell." The fish came up, was frowning a little bit this time, if you can imagine a fish frowning, and he said, "What does your wife want now?" And the fisherman said, "Fish, she wants to be king in a grand castle." And the fish said, "Go home, for she already is." And so the fisherman made his way back, and he knew what he was going to see. There where the old castle had stood a great big shining castle. And he went inside, and there were servants that were cleaning up all over the place, and the floors were plush with carpet that was so thick you could poke your finger down and it would cover up your whole finger before you got to the floor underneath. And there were gold everywhere, and his wife was sitting on a gold and jeweled throne wearing a big golden crown. The fisherman sighed, and he said, "Is this enough, Isabel?" And she said, "Maybe." And the fisherman knew that it was not going to be enough. And soon enough, he found that was the case. The wife was saying, "I don't think it's enough to be king. If the fish can make me king, he could just as easily make me emperor. I want to rule an empire." The fisherman said, "I really don't think that this is a good idea at all. Why aren't we just happy with what we have?" But she could not be happy. Not one bit. Not now that she had the idea of becoming emperor in her head. And she got angrier the longer he tried to protest, and she stomped her foot and waved her golden king's scepter at him. And finally, off he went down to the water. "Oh, fish of the sea, please come up and listen to me. Come, for my wife Isabel wishes what I dare not tell." And the fish came up and said, "What is her wish now?" The fisherman said, "I'm very, very sorry, but now she wishes to become emperor." And the fish blew a bubble and said, "Go home, she already is." This time, when the fisherman made his way back to his home, he saw an enormous, much bigger than the old palace, an enormous palace made of shining marble. It hurt his eyes to look at it from a distance. And when he got inside, the palace was full of people bustling everywhere, servants who were dressed in silk. And in the throne room, in front of his wife, stood rows of kings from all sorts of kingdoms who were bowing down in front of his wife who sat in white robes on top of a throne that was almost a mile high. The fisherman didn't even know what to think anymore. He said to himself, surely she can't want anything more beyond this. But as soon as he said that to himself, he heard his wife's voice echoing from above. "Husband, I enjoy ruling my empire, but now what I really wish is to rule over the entire world." And the fisherman said, "I don't understand." She said, "I want to rule not just kings in their kingdoms. I want to command the sun and the moon, to tell them when to rise and when to fall. I want to tell the animals how they should be. I want to rule everything." The fisherman said, "No, that is too much." But the wife, she had gone too far at this point to accept no. And for days she raged. She pulled at her hair. She screamed. She was in a fit of hysteria. She wanted more and more and more, and she would never be satisfied. At last, when the fisherman decided that this was never going to end, he went back down to the water, and he called, "Oh, fish of the sea, please come up and listen to me. Come, for my wife Isabel wishes what I dare not tell." And the fish came up, and this time he was definitely frowning. And he said, "What is your wife's wish?" And the fisherman said, "I don't quite know how to say it, but my wife has demanded to be the ruler of everything, of the heavens and of the earth, of all the people and all the animals, and of the sun and the moon." And there was a long moment while they waited. And finally the fish said, "Go home. You will find your wife in the old hut where she belongs." And that's exactly where the fisherman found his wife. And no matter what after that, even when the wife went to the sea herself and called for the fish, he never appeared again. All right, let's do a fish finger play, okay? And it's kind of a counting one. It's going to take both hands. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I let it go again. Why did I let it go? Because it bit my finger so. Which finger did it bite? The little finger on the right. Let's do that one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I let it go again. Why did I let it go? Because it bit my fingers so. Which finger did it bite? The little finger on the right. Okay, this is another story about someone who just couldn't stop doing something, no matter what. No matter, even if everyone around him was telling him to stop. But this story's not quite the same as the last one. This story comes from Japan, and it's about a little boy named Joji. Joji lived on a farm, and he had lots of brothers and sisters who lived there with him. And the other brothers and sisters were very good at helping around the farm. They took care of animals and they pulled weeds from the garden, but not Joji. Joji didn't really like working on a farm. Joji liked one thing, and that was to draw. And he only drew one thing: cats. Cats, cats, cats. He drew big cats and small cats and fat cats and skinny cats and sleeping cats and running cats, all the kind of cats you could imagine. And he didn't do his chores. And so his father got really upset with him. And he said, "Joji, you'll never become a farmer this way." And Joji said, "I'm sorry. I'll try harder." But it didn't matter. Even when he found himself out in the dirt with a hoe, chopping at weeds, he looked at the dirt and he couldn't think of anything else until he sat down with a stick and started drawing cats in the dirt. Eventually, his father got too frustrated with him, and he said, "Maybe you're not meant to be a farmer, Joji. Maybe I shall send you to be a priest." And he sent him off to a temple where there was a priest who taught him how to read and write. And the lessons were hard, but they were interesting. The priest taught him how to make ink by crushing and stirring in the little bowl, and Joji made lots of ink. He was good at it. But when he looked at that ink and he looked at all the rice paper that lay around the temple, he simply couldn't help himself. And so instead of writing out his letters and vocabulary words, he drew cats. Cats, cats, cats. Big cats and little cats and fat cats and skinny cats and sleeping cats and running cats and every kind of cat. And not only that, but when he finished with the rice paper around him, he started drawing cats on the walls with his new ink. And he drew them on the sliding panels that blocked off areas of the temple. And that was not a good idea, because the priest was very unhappy about that. And he said, "Joji, you will never be a priest this way. I'm afraid you will have to leave this temple. Go back home to your father." So Joji packed up his things and left, but he didn't want to go back home to his father because he knew his father would be very angry. And then he thought, on my way here, I remember passing another temple. Maybe if I go there, I can try again, and this time try harder not to draw. And so he made his way back along the road to where there was a small village. Didn't seem like there were very many people living in the village, even though there were a lot of buildings. And he went up to the temple, and he knocked on the door, and he knocked again. No one answered. Didn't seem like there was anyone in the temple. But Joji pushed open the door, and inside, even though it was covered with dust everywhere he looked and there were no priests, what there was rice paper. Lots and lots of paper to draw on, and even some ink and supplies to make more ink. And so all by himself in the giant room, Joji sat down and started to draw cats. Big cats and little cats and fat cats and skinny cats and sleeping cats and running cats, every kind of cat. The cats were all over the place. He drew piles of cats on the paper, on the floor, on the walls. He was so surrounded with cats that he thought he'd never drawn that many cats before in his entire life. Well, eventually he got tired. And so he thought he was going to go to sleep. in the temple, but something about that room, the big, big room, with nobody else in it, made him a little bit nervous. He said, maybe I should find somewhere a little more cozy to sleep. And so, off in a corner, he found a closet. It even had some old coats in it. And so he snuggled up in that closet and he went to sleep. But he didn't sleep for long before he heard a very strange noise outside the door of the closet. It was sort of like a growl. But it wasn't like any animal he'd ever heard in his life. And he wasn't going to open that door for anything. He heard heavy footsteps moving around out in the outer room. And he shivered. He shivered and he didn't know what to do. And he heard the footsteps get closer and closer, and he heard sniffing at the door. And just as he was about to scream, he heard another sound. And then there was the sound of fighting, yowling and hissing, and two creatures thumping to the floor and fighting and making awful noises. And eventually it stopped. And Joji opened the door a crack just to see what there was to see. And there was the monster lying on the floor. A great, big, enormous rat monster. It was a rat the size of a cow, if you can imagine that. And it was thoroughly knocked out. It was not going to hurt anybody anymore. Because there was something else in the room. Where before Joji had gone to sleep with lots and lots and lots of pictures of cats around, now there was one giant cat drawn on the wall. And Joji looked at that giant cat, and it seemed like it was smiling in satisfaction. And Joji knew what had happened. And he bowed to the picture of the cat and said, "Thank you very, very much for saving me." When the villagers came in and they saw that the rat monster was no longer a danger to them, they were so very happy. They thanked Joji over and over, and they said, "Please stay here. You can be our priest and monster handler." But Joji didn't become a priest. And he didn't become a farmer either. Joji became an artist. And what he did most was artwork of cats. Today we're going to sing The Ants Go Marching. It's a marching song, so you could just sit still and clap your hands, or maybe even just sing along without even clapping, or you could get up and march around. It's a good idea to do, especially if you've got ants in your pants. If you have a drum, then you should drum. But I have to tell you, it's really easy to drum even if you don't have a real drum. We have real drums in the library, and I know when we do story times that involve drums inside the library face-to-face, we hand these out, and they're very fun to use. If you've got something like a small pot that you can hold in one hand, it acts just like one of these lollipop drums we have at the library. You can bang on it with a wooden spoon just as easily as you can bang with a mallet. It'll make a kind of a clanging sound, and that could be fun too. Don't bang on it with anything that's going to damage it if your mom likes her pots and pans. But if you don't have those, maybe you've got something that was going to go in the recycling bin, and that's fine too. An old coffee container or something that held cookies. You can bang with your hand. If you can find a stick, it makes a clunk clunk. Any way you want to do it. You can have a drum. You could even take an old, let me think, what could we take? What else could we do? We could even take a cup, like a big plastic cup, and put some wax paper, if you've got any of that, or parchment paper around the top and put a rubber band on it. That's something you can tap on. Right now, grab whatever you've got on hand. But if you go back and watch this later, you can find whatever drums you might happen to have in your house and play along. Okay? I'm going to use this one because I like red. I could use the coffee one too. I'm going to play this one. All right? Here we go. You ready? I had to stop for a moment because my dog started barking. But here we go. The ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching one by one. The little one stops to suck his thumb, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. Let's try a different bat pattern. The ants go marching two by two, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching two by two, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching two by two. The little one stops to tie her shoe, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. The ants go marching three by three, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching three by three, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching three by three. The little one stops to climb a tree, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. The ants go marching four by four, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching four by four, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching four by four. The little one stops to shut the door, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. Shh. The ants go marching five by five, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching five by five, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching five by five. The little one stops to take a dive, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. Louder this time. The ants go marching six by six, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching six by six, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching six by six. The little one stops to pick up sticks, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. The ants go marching seven by seven, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching seven by seven, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching seven by seven. The little one stops to eat some melon, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. The ants go marching eight by eight, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching eight by eight, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching eight by eight. The little one stops to check the gate, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. Up to nine. The ants go marching nine by nine, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching nine by nine, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching nine by nine. The little one stops to check the time, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, boom, boom. The ants go marching 10 by 10, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching 10 by 10, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching 10 by 10. The little one stops to say, the end. Did you get stuck? Did you freeze? Or did you trip there at the end? I surprised you, didn't I? Well, I hope you liked all that today. And I am really looking forward to seeing you guys again soon. If you come into the library, we've got something kind of special going on right now. We've got a scavenger hunt that's set up. It's just a little one. Don't get too excited. But if you go up to the desk and ask, they'll give you a piece of paper that tells you clues about where to find some hidden things all over the library. And I bet that you can find them all. And maybe, if you do find them all, you can go get a sticker from the librarian at the desk. What do you say? You want to try that? Oh, and we've still got tons of books and story CDs even. Books that come with CDs so you can play the CD while you're flipping the pages of the book. It'll tell you stories just like I will. Only there's no friendly librarian there and no smiling face for you. So I know which one I'd prefer. Are we ready? Are we ready to end? It's always hard to end, but I need the stretch, and I bet you do too. So, reach for the ceiling. Ooh, and touch the floor. Stand up again. Let's do some more. Touch your head, and now your knees, up to your shoulders. Like this, you see. Reach for the ceiling, and touch the floor. That's all there is. There isn't any more. I'll see you later.